Hello and welcome to the FT's Brexit debates, where we invite a number of speakers on either side of the argument as to whether the UK should stay in the European Union to come in and make their case, and then challenge one another through questions. Today up for debate is the proposal Cameron sealed a good deal for the UK. And with me to discuss this are Lucy Thomas, Deputy Director of Britain Stronger in Europe, who will be arguing for the proposition. Speaking against will be Stephen Parkinson, National Organiser at the Vote Leave campaign group. Welcome, thank you both for coming in. You're both now going to get 1 minute each to make your respective cases, and then there's going to be an opportunity for you to challenge one another through questions. Lucy Thomas, I'd like you to go first, talking to the proposition that Cameron secured a good deal for the UK.
Well, I think David Cameron secured a great deal for the UK. We now have the best of both worlds. We're part of the largest free trade single market in the world, where half of our exports go, where there are 500 million consumers. But we're not in ever closer union. We're not going to be dragged into further political integration. We're not in the euro. We're not going to be outvoted by eurozone countries. And so I think the Prime Minister secured a great deal. We are also going to have more power in Britain's Parliament here to block and amend EU rules. And so we now know what in looks like. And so the challenge to those on the other side is, what does out look like?
Thank you very much, Lucy Thomas. Stephen Parkinson, your opportunity. 1 minute speaking against the proposal that Cameron secured a good deal for the UK.
Well, as I'm sure all readers and viewers of the Financial Times know, if you want to negotiate a good deal, you have to be prepared to walk away from the negotiating table if you don't get what you want. The trouble with David Cameron's renegotiation is that nobody in the EU and nobody in the UK seriously believed that he was ever going to do anything other than campaign to keep us in the European Union. As a result, the deal that he's negotiated is a hollow one. It's 99% the same as what we have already. It's not legally binding. It leaves the European courts in charge of the deal, and it means that EU judges and EU politicians that the British people haven't elected are free to tear up the deal after we've voted in our referendum. The British people want to take back control, bring back powers to the UK, and unfortunately nothing in David Cameron's deal will do that.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like you both to turn to face one another. This is your opportunity to challenge one another on the basis of what the other person has said. Lucy Thomas, you go first. Question to Stephen Parkinson.
From what you were saying there, it implies that you want to vote again, perhaps. Do you think that voting to leave isn't actually out, as all of the EU leaders who David Cameron was negotiating with, all of the EU institutions have been very clear, out means out?
Well, what I was saying is that David Cameron had this opportunity. He's been lead of the Conservative Party for 10 years. He's, over that decade, talked about a whole range of things that he wanted to change, whether that was a complete opt-out from the Charter of Fundamental Rights, whether it's reforming the Common Agricultural Policy, which does such damage to our farmers around the country, whether it's the small but hugely costly and absurd things like the fact that the European Parliament moves between Brussels and Strasbourg at great cost to the taxpayer. None of those things formed part of his negotiation. I think it's a real wasted opportunity to go in there and take the first deal that he got. I think that's really bad negotiating tactics.
But does out mean out? Just to...
Yes, I think it does. I mean, look at this deal that's been put to us. This doesn't give us control over the laws that are made here. It leaves the European courts in charge of those fundamental questions. We have to vote leave. The best way to bring back power is to leave the EU.
Stephen Parkinson, your chance now to ask a question.
I mean, Lucy, surely you can see this. This is not a legally binding deal. Without treaty change that has been ratified in all the other member states of the European Union, Cameron's deal has all the weight of saying the check's in the post.
It is actually an international law decision which gets deposited at the UN, so it is a legally binding document, and there is the promise of treaty change for ever closer union, for example, so we're no longer included in that, so that non-Eurozone members like the UK aren't outvoted. So it is a legally binding deal.
It's the promise of change, as you say. It's not legally binding, where the British people are going to be asked to vote on a promise, on a blank cheque. That's a leap into the dark, isn't it?
Well, I think we do absolutely know the benefits of staying in. These changes are guaranteed. It is a legally binding decision by all of those EU leaders. The leap into the dark actually is what you're asking people to do. We know, as I say, what in looks like. There is no out. There is no version of out on the table. Voting to leave is a leap into the unknown. Article 50 gets triggered and the remaining EU member states sit in a room, decide what deal we get, and if we end up like Norway and Switzerland, for example, we have to comply with all of the rules and we have no say over them, and we still have to pay into the EU budget and accept free movement of people.
One follow-up question, Lucy Thomas, to Stephen Parkinson.
I wonder what of those options, Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, for example, all talked about over the weekend by Nigel Farage, what actual version of out do you propose for the country?
Well, I think we can get a British option that's better than any of those. We are 6 times larger than Norway. We can get a deal that is at least 6 times better. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We are an important trading partner for other EU countries. It is not in anyone's interest for us to not to conclude a deal that maintains that balance of trade, those friendly relationships between the UK and other European countries. Crucially, though, we should have the opportunity to trade with the rest of the world. Whilst we are a member of the European Union, we don't have a trade deal with important allies like Australia and New Zealand and the US, or emerging economies like India, China and Brazil.
I'm just going to interrupt because we're almost out of time, but just in the interest of balance, you've got one last chance. You've got a chance to ask
I just want to sort of
the final question, but keep it brief.
Sure.
Please.
I just want to press a bit further on this point that this deal isn't sealed. I mean, Martin Schulz, who's the President of the European Parliament, has said that MEPs, people that we haven't elected, will have the chance to unpick this after the referendum. Isn't that a huge uncertainty?
It's a legally binding decision, as I've said several times. 27 other EU countries have all agreed to this. It's highly unlikely the Parliament is going to change anything. And actually Martin Schulz himself said that they were not going to veto it. They did not have a veto power. But I think what's really important is the choice on the ballot paper that people will have to make a decision on is, do we stay in with the benefits that we know, or do we leave? And all of the options out, where we still have access to the single market, means complying with the rules. It means paying in. And if you wanted, for example, to get a free trade agreement, those that the EU has with the rest of the world at the moment do not include services, and that would be hugely damaging to Britain's service sector, which is around 80% of our economy. And so I think the challenge is for you
going to have
spell
to
out
end
what's
it here
out
now. We're right up against time. Thank you. It's been a fascinating discussion, but we are now out of time. Lucy Thomas, Stephen Parkinson, thank you both very much.
Thank you.